serve as vice chair of this committee. Scott, our chair, is on the Zoom call. But I've been asked to conduct the in-person meeting. So we would do welcome and give introductions. We'll start here.
D. Chamberlain, Saratoga Springs Owners Association.
Anders Bate with Linden City.
Todd Munger with Lehigh City.
Josh Holt from Utah Lake State Park.
Scott Bird with Utah County.
Eric Ellis, Utah Lake Commission.
Sam Brager, Utah Lake Commission.
And do those online want to introduce themselves?
Chip Elder, DNR.
Katie Becker with the Utah Division of Water Quality.
Good morning, this is Scott Haley with Division of Water Quality.
Reed Price, Forum.
Morgan Bolter, Brushy Farm Ceilings.
This is Mike Mills with the June Recovery Implementation Program.
Rebecca Andrews, Provo City.
Thank you. Someone else is joining.
Looks like it's a public person.
Wonderful. Someone from the public. All right. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from February 19th? Are there any concerns? Do we have a motion to accept the minutes?
I never saw the minutes.
They were in the email that went out about a week ago,
Last Thursday.
Thursday.
Okay. I must not have got, I only got this invite to the meeting. So it must have not gotten to me.
I got it.
It slipped through your email. We looked and it's there. It just somehow,
Always sent.
you spammed us, Reed.
Not the. We switched over to a new we're now have G Suite instead of Microsoft Exchange, so I just barely switched. Possibly it's lost somewhere.
So I just tried sending it to you again, Reed. It's still rsprice@warm.org, right?
Yep.
Okay, I just sent it to you again. Hopefully that comes through for you.
All right. For those of you who have had a chance to look them over, do we have a motion to accept the minutes?
Make the motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Any corrections or adjustments to the minutes? Seeing none, then all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Approved. Water quality study progress report, Scott?
Okay. Good morning, all. So over the last several months, we've been working primarily on a couple of key documents. One is what we're calling a nutrient criteria framework, and that's essentially nutrient criteria for Utah Lake. That's on today is a strategic research plan, and that really outlines all of the key data gaps that prevent us from developing criteria. And then that document informs additional research studies, several of which are being initiated right now to try to fill some of those gaps. Primary focus, I guess, most interesting to this group is this framework document and an exercise that the steering committee is engaged with in improving the framework document. I'll just briefly note that the science panel had a role in developing the framework document from a scientific technical standpoint and approved it in their meeting in early March, I believe it was. And then we took that document to the steering committee in mid-March, and there were several comments to address. And then there was just, on that document, there was a broader consensus that more work could be done to define the management goals that are defined in there. And what I mean by that is, we're protecting or developing this study and defining criteria for nitrogen and phosphorus as it relates to our uses, and those are recreation, agriculture, and aquatic life. But some of those uses are a little more nuanced in that, for recreation, you might have different goals to protect for. So, for example, you may not want to have algal scums as a management goal, or you want to reduce the amount of algal scums. But also in the same vein, you would want to protect for algal toxins and the risk that they pose to a recreationist. And so coming out of that meeting and those comments, Erica Gaddis and Eric Ellis, as the co-chairs of the steering committee, initiated this effort to speak individually with all members of the steering committee to start defining their individual goals for the lake and related to those Clean Water Act uses that I mentioned. So we spent some considerable time on one-to-one conversations, about an hour with each representative and alternate representative, kind of got their feedback on what goals they would like to protect for in the lake. Took that information and then kind of summarized it in this table format. And maybe, Eric, do you think it's appropriate to share this now? And
Yeah, for sure.
everyone in the room now will have ability to see it. So let's see if I can do this. Okay. Okay, let me know if you're, looks like it's loading. There we go. So coming out of those conversations in March and April, we put together this document that kind of outlines what the management goals are and this idea of assessment endpoints and metrics. So
Hey, Scott,
what parameters would you use? Yes?
it looks like the presentation might be off to the right, or that it's not somehow loaded.
Okay.
It says you're presenting, but it doesn't actually share, it didn't share your screen.
Okay, let's see, because it looks like it's working on my end. Can you see it? Is that better now?
Oh, you know what?
You probably have to enable screen share on your side.
Speaker
Never
view.
mind, it's because we
It's our
pinned it.
problem.
You get speaker view.
It's because we.
Yeah, it's working for us as well.
We pinned you as the speaker so we could see your smiling face extra bright, but that made it so that we didn't get to see your presentation.
Okay,
Now we see it.
Now we're good, thanks, Scott.
Sorry.
Okay, excellent. All right, I'm sorry for that. Anyway, this document, I won't go into too much detail here, but we kind of provide an introduction, define the terms we're using, how we define a designated use, a management goal, an assessment endpoint, target, and et cetera, and where the sources of information will come in to populate this information. And I'll just scroll down to this section of the table for now as an example of the information that we received from the steering committee members. And in the left column here, you see our Clean Water Act use, followed by a management goal, the assessment endpoint that we've used for that management goal, the metric, which we're now kind of calling measures, so what the things that we would measure in the environment or use as an indicator of whether or not the goal is being achieved. And then the target, this is the value or how much of that measure or metric would be needed or used to determine whether or not you met your goal. And then the target source is just the source of information, and then we started to spell out some of the informational gaps there. So this is a lot of information on this table, but just walking through the management goals part of it, which is really the core discussion right now with the steering committee. We presented this draft to them in our last call in late May. And now we have this open for public, or open for their comment, with really the goal of trying to refine these management goals and make sure that they accurately account for the steering committee's expectations and needs for the project. And so we're, I guess, working through a comment period with them. I think we expect their comments to be due sometime this week. And then for today's discussion, we just wanted to point the technical committee into the direction of these management goals and let us know if you have any initial feedback or comments on them. And then maybe Eric, over the course of this week, if you could, if you're not able to provide comments here during the meeting today, we could take those from you. Eric and I can compile those and then incorporate those into the broader effort. I guess just in general, the next steps for this, we are making some revisions to this table now based on comments we did have in the last meeting. And I'll go over some of those here in a second. And then we're moving towards trying to redraft this, get it back to the steering committee, addressing the comments that we hear from them in the next, or over this week, And then hopefully towards the fall, I think the intention is for Eric and Erica to take this to the Utah Lake Commission Governing Board and kind of present the findings of this exercise and then get their buy-in, assuming that the technical committee and the steering committee have already essentially bought off and are in agreement with the content of the table.
Hey, Scott?
So, yes, go ahead.
If it would be possible to get the most updated copy of that sent over, you could send that to me today. I can share that with the technical committee, and that way they have a actual copy of it to read through and provide some comments for us this week.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that, and I actually was about to pull that into an email to you, realizing that it would probably be an action item coming out of here. So a couple things to point out. The targets are, for a lot of them, are TBD. The ones that are populated are the ones that we have decent information about. So you'll see algal toxin concentrations, and these are kind of interim targets that are being proposed based on guidance documents that we operate under from the EPA. When we get down into the wildlife components and protection of fisheries and shorebirds, we have additional metrics or measures and associated targets for dissolved oxygen, pH, temperature, etc. Just our typical water quality standards that we protect for those uses. But I just wanted to point out that some of these are TBD and will be determined through additional exercises, probably through the steering committee. And one that you'll see noted repeatedly is this idea of a recreational survey. So, what do recreation users, if you look at the third row down, expect in terms of the magnitude, frequency, and duration of algal blooms? So, how much or how many blooms are too many in the course of a summer for your typical recreationist? What extent of the lake are recreationists comfortable with an algal bloom occurring on? So is it 10%, 20%, 50%? And so there's a number of those kinds of things in here that we and the steering committee, I guess, has identified as a potential to seek for public input on through a recreational survey. And so probably coming out of this, assuming this information doesn't change too much, I can envision that the steering committee and maybe the Utah Lake Commission would initiate a recreational survey to kind of get some feedback from Utah Lake recreationists on what they expect the lake will look like. So, I guess I don't know that I want to go row by row or cell by cell on these tables, but just generally kind of point those out to you. One of the comments that we did receive that was a really good one actually was to add a new column to this table between targets and target source to define the existing conditions so that the steering committee might have some indication of how far we are away from achieving a particular goal and how much work might go into getting there. And so that's kind of one of the reasons that we had hoped to have the table refined for a steering committee meeting on the 30th of this month, but that meeting's now been postponed to allow us some additional time to work through that current condition analysis. So I'll just scroll down real quickly. Warm water fishery use on this page. So those goals that are associated with protection of warm water fishery was specifically called out protections for the tube sucker, dietary needs, protection of their spawning habitat, etc. Environmental habitat needs, macrophyte cover, etc. And so those are pieces of information that are being considered as part of this. Those are probably the highlights here. And then this page is associated with the waterfowl use and agricultural uses. Just happen to be that those two uses fit well on one page. That's why they're grouped together here. What kind of macroinvertebrates do waterfowl need to sustain their diet? What kind of toxin threats are there associated with waterfowl? Similarly for agricultural uses. And here the two big concerns are concentration of algal toxins as they might pose risk to agricultural stock and to irrigation of crops. comments that one big comment here is this idea of secondary water, so water that's used for irrigation purposes, not exactly associated with agriculture, but for irrigation of residential lawns and gardens and other areas not directly associated with agricultural production. So one comment that we have here from this version of the table is to remove that secondary use from the secondary goal from the agricultural use and kind of have it its own standalone use of a lake. That was a comment that we received from the agricultural folks. And then the last page of this is more associated with downstream uses of Utah Lake water. So we know that the Jordan River has very similar designated Clean Water Act uses that Utah Lake does. So this warm water recreation, or it's a 2B recreation as opposed to a 2A. So we assume there that the 2A in Utah Lake, the frequent primary contact recreation, would actually be protective already of the 2B recreational use in the river, Jordan River. 3B wildlife, or warm water wildlife, so that's going to be similar. We have some notation of the Jordan River organic matter TMDL in there, but we again assume that if the uses are protected in the lake, the downstream uses in the Jordan River will be protected. Same goes for the 3D and 4. And then here we have the undefined uses of secondary recreational water use that was more explicitly spelled out. How are secondary uses impacted by cyanotoxins? So that's in general, I guess, a quick overview of the table. There's quite a bit of information in there. We are actively editing this now, cleaning up some of the terminology, making sure that the language used for the metrics and assessment endpoint columns is consistent and not really blending across the two. There were some examples where the metric was actually written as an assessment endpoint and vice versa. So working to clean that up, adding the current conditions column, spelling out some additional protections for warm water wildlife threats from cyanotoxins in our 3D table, and then also for the 3D, the waterfowl use, we're spelling those out as well. Those are comments that we received from the steering committee. So I guess with that, we'll just open it up for some initial reaction and take a couple comments, and then follow up with you with the table following the meeting today.
Are there any questions?
Without having seen it before, there's nothing really, haven't had a chance to
It's a
review it.
little hard to see up close, so maybe it will be sent to us so we can review it.
Yeah.
Eric, do you have anything to add to that? And then maybe, I guess, I noticed Chris Caliber joined a minute ago, and Mike Rao, both members of the steering committee. So if there's anything to add to that, please feel free to jump in.
I would just add that it was very helpful to take the opportunity to meet with each of the steering committee members and get their feedback. Oftentimes during an actual meeting, it's hard to kind of challenge someone to come out with their I don't know, unrestrained thoughts on the various topics that we're discussing. People kind of hold off to make the best comment possible. And it was interesting to kind of go through the process of the various uses that are being protected or that we're shooting to protect, and see how much consensus that there actually was among all of those steering committee members. I expected, being somewhat pessimistic, that there would be a lot more, I don't know, diversity or disagreement on where we should have those goals set, and there was a lot more agreement than there was disagreement, and that was refreshing. And I think that it means that we're going to have a much better time taking this through and having it be something that, as a consensus, we can agree on. So that was great.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'll echo that. I mean, I was really surprised with how well folks align with one another in independent conversations. So that was really, really fun to see. And I apologize, I know Scott Bird's also in the room, member of the steering committee, so.
Yeah, this is Chris Caliber, how will we add, I look at, in on all those conversations, and Erica were in on, and hear, the similarities with the diverse, steering committee membership. I was anticipating a lot of diversity in how people responded to those, conservation goals or targets, and, it's good to hear that there's a lot of consistency among membership, and I'm glad to hear that. It's a great effort. It's a lot of work, and really appreciate everything it's great to be a part of it.
Thanks, Chris. Okay.
Hey Scott, this is Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
My comment is on the 1C classification for the Jordan River.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should really check closer with that with Jordan Valley, because my conversations with them, they don't have any plans in the future to use the Jordan River as a drinking water system. And the managers that I've talked to have even said that 1C classification could be removed because they'll never use it. So I just think we need to be careful that we don't apply like a drinking water standard to this water if that classification is not really representative of any future use of that water.
Great, yeah, thanks for that, Mike. And that was something that the steering committee did discuss at their last meeting, and we came out of that meeting with an action item to kind of set up a meeting with the Jordan Valley folks, kind of work through that need of the Jordan River as a drinking water source. Also part of that conversation too is there seemed to be some consensus or some idea that protection for the recreational use in Utah Lake would actually come with more strict numbers than protection of the Jordan River as a drinking water source. Recognizing that we only protect for drinking water as a source water, and that assumes some level of treatment before the water is ready to be distributed to the end user. So those two things, we haven't yet had a chance to meet with Jordan Valley and others on that topic, but recognizing the sensitive use context, it is an interesting question and two aspects that we are tracking with that particular part of the table. So thanks again, Mike. Okay. Any others?
Scott, I would just add on that very topic that when we do our current situation analysis, you add that extra column. I think that it would be helpful to articulate that if that is the case, that if the protection of recreational use is more strict than the existing right to have Jordan River water be a potential water source for drinking water, that's just clearly stated, and if it's not going to change anything, there's probably no real need to eliminate or go down the path of trying to eliminate that potential future use if it is not changing any management goals at this time.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. If the water is already good enough by these metrics to use it as drinking water, and it's already met that goal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
an extra level of effort to go through a use change.
And I think that it would be in our best interest to not extinguish a potential future drinking water source if we didn't need to, because it's probably equally as difficult, if not more so, to recreate that down the road if we are really in a pinch for water. it's probably good to have as many options as possible when that day comes, if that day comes.
Okay.
And
Good
Scott,
point.
and I agree with that, and Scott, my comments mainly because of the target source there that's listed, and I know this is a draft, but it has the EPA 2015 guidance listed in there. And that guidance from EPA is really specific to drinking water itself, and the thresholds, the health advisories, and that guidance are, you know, an order of magnitude lower than your recreational thresholds. So we just wouldn't want to apply those type of standards, the health advisories to this water. It's mainly required with that.
Okay, yeah, thanks, actually, that's a really good catch. Mike, are you aware of a more appropriate guidance to reference there as a target source?
So I would tend to more agree that to go with the recreational guidance, because that 2015 EPA guidance really is specific to water that's being delivered to people's homes. That's what's coming out of the tap. So I think that's the guidance is the recreational number.
Okay, great, yeah, thanks for that.
Any other questions? Okay, so the algae monitoring plan?
So, Scott, could you quickly tell us, I know that an advisory came out that said Division of Water Quality will not be monitoring Utah Lake for algae blooms this summer. We had a meeting discussing this morning, and Central Utah Water suggested that they do a little bit of algae bloom testing. Can we expect there to be some testing, but maybe more at a local level? How should we respond? Because I know that the state park manager mentioned earlier today that they're already getting calls about, are there blooms on the lake? Is it safe? We get the same types of requests. Do we just direct them to the signage and state that there's no official monitoring taking place, or what are you hearing?
Okay, well, on that last point, well, I'll give a little overview on where we're at with algal monitoring as it relates to our budget for this year. And then maybe have Jody help me out with the last point of that question. But so last year we received, in the past we've had a hard time coming up with funding to do algal bloom monitoring, and we specifically focus on, we mostly focus on Utah Lake because we didn't have resources to go statewide. A year ago in the state legislative session, we received an ongoing appropriation that allowed us to monitor with high frequency all lakes statewide to inform the algal bloom monitoring advisory program. So we would collect the information within the Division of Water Quality. We had a dedicated crew that traveled around, and then we'd report that data to the local and state health departments to make a determination of whether an advisory was appropriate. So this last year, during the legislative session, and I think there's probably two things associated with the budget. One was the original legislative session, and then I believe that there's probably, and I'm less familiar with this, some implications to the special session on the algal bloom monitoring program. But I'll speak to the first one. During the session this winter, our ongoing HAB funds were diverted to Forest Fire State Lands to fund a study proposal by the Timpanogos Special Service District to implement a mesocosm experimentation on Utah Lake adjacent to the TSSD outfall to test out various chemical treatments of nutrients, look at effects of wind and turbidity, macrophytes, and all these other things that are relevant to the Utah Lake Science Panel. But anyway, our funding for the HAB program was essentially diverted to that that program, leaving no resources to conduct a statewide harmful algal bloom monitoring effort. And then we were trying to recoup those and then provide one-time funding for just this year, after the session, so that we could get by this particular year to implement our HAB advisor program, and then hopefully next year have an additional allocation that resupplies that ongoing funds. But my understanding now is that, essentially we have no funding for HAB monitoring. And so as of today, I don't think we've made a single visit to a single lake around the state to collect HAB advisory information. So including Utah Lake. So what that means for advisories and how we inform the rec users, I'm not entirely sure. So there's a second part of this. Not all hope is lost, I guess. I mean, recognizing that we have two sources or two uses for the data and information collected by that HAB advisory program. One is to make the advisories, working with the health departments to inform recreational users on the lake. Second is to collect the data that will inform nutrient criteria development down the road. So as you saw in that management goals table, there's a lot of talk about the individual algal toxins, right, and what their thresholds might be. And we anticipate some modeling exercises where you relate those to various water quality parameters. So do you always have high toxins at high nutrient concentrations? Or do you have high toxins, are they associated with chlorophyll? So if the lake becomes greener, is there a better chance for toxins? And so we recognize by not having data for this year, and that HAB monitoring program in Utah Lake is essentially a weekly effort, which supplies a higher resolution of information from around the lake, which is really helpful from an analytical standpoint. So recognizing that we don't have that anymore, we're trying to cobble together some resources to reinstate some of that monitoring. Mostly, I mean, obviously we would share that information with the HAB advisory folks, but my interest is mostly just to start trying to provide some data so that we don't miss out on a field season and an opportunity to collect a sufficient amount of data to continue to find those relationships that we're seeing. So that's essentially that's a brand new effort, and we just started talking about that 2 days ago. I'm not entirely sure where the funding would come from for it. We have some ideas. Probably, the most likely would be to take from the Utah Lake Water Quality Study funds that we do have left, and those are becoming limited as we're working through this project, and we're actively seeking additional funding to continue the Utah Lake project. But yeah, that's kind of the initial thought with some other ideas in the works. Jody, do you have anything to add on that?
You did a great job summarizing that. In addition, I would say that we'll revert for our statewide HAB monitoring. We'll revert to what we did originally when we didn't have funding, but we still wanted to respond. Is that we'll take phone calls and from the public that if they are recreating and you see a balloon, please call our spill line number, which is on our website, and then we'll work with the health department in order to issue an advisory, but that'll be absent data that we would collect. It would just be a sort of visual exercise. In addition, we have satellite imagery, so we can see sort of where blooms are forming, and we'll probably use that as a tool, again, absent collecting data to issue advisories. It's just that the health departments right now are swamped really with COVID, so we're going to try to just rely on visual and the satellite imagery and do advisories that way.
Can you remind us all about where the signage is and what's included on the signage?
So the signage is placed at all our marinas and Sandy Beach. The signage has photos of cyanobacterial blooms that are kind of the issue of greatest concern for boaters and lake users. And so it gives them an image of what to watch for, and if they spot that, then head to a different area. And it also points out that blooms are maybe present in isolated locations. And it gives a poison control, or the poison, what's it called? Poison control hotline, so that they can call
Poison
in.
control center.
Yeah, poison control center. So they can call in and get, and kind of talk through what, if they're experiencing some sort of symptom, they can talk through it and know whether or not they need to seek more medical assistance.
So, as was said on, I don't know who was talking, but the public, should they, where, does it say where they should call if they see a bloom for this visual?
I don't know, Jody, is that
It
on?
Yes.
has, it has the website
Yeah.
that would then direct
It's
them
on
to
our website at habs.utah.gov,
Okay.
habs.utah.gov, and all the numbers are there. It'll be the poison control center line, the spill line, and you can also call your local health department.
Yeah, all right, just making sure that that's on there so that,
Are there going to be any guidelines given to the public for this reporting of blooms? I mean, who in the public, general public, know what a bloom is? It seems like they're going to open themselves up to a lot of calls.
My guess is that it'll be a similar number of calls to most every year, because people, if nothing less, they're interested to know if what they saw was something that should be of concern. And so they'll call in and explain it, or they'll have a picture of it and say, hey, what is this? And
yeah, the pictures, I think. And having our social media site will help in people posting a picture to say, is this,
Yeah.
what is this? And maybe keeping up more to date on our social media will help people too. All right,
We can
any
probably get
other
something out
questions?
to our homeowners. We have about 1,000 homeowners in our association.
And
So
just,
what to look for and where they can go to our harbor and look
yeah,
at the
and you
pictures.
have and there's a sign at
Yes,
your
I saw,
harbor as
yes.
well, so.
That'd be great. All right. No other questions? We'll move on to the director's update. All right.
Okay. First item, sorry, was there a question?
Just a thank you.
Oh, yeah. Lakeshore enhancement project proposals. So this is the Utah Lake Commission's grant that was offered this year. Maybe first, Josh, you want to report on what, you guys did some work in the campground with weeds, and what else so far?
That's the only one that we've worked on so far, due to water levels. We were gonna put some sand down and we were gonna put some road base and have the south jetty graded, but with our uncertainty of how high we were gonna get with the water levels, we held off on those. We actually went above 100% for one day.
Oh, nice.
So now that the water's kind of receding back down, we can start working on some of the others. We've also got a proposal, or some funding for putting a water line into the nature area. That was going to be put in by our region crew, which has been tied up at Bear Lake for the last couple months. So as soon as we can get them down here, we can start working on that as well. And then we had first wood chips for the playground, and they were out of state, and we kind of had to stay in state with the whole COVID. They wouldn't let us travel to go get those. So once things relax a little bit there, we're going to go get that as well. So the only thing we've been able to do right now is the grass, which has actually turned out quite well. We're pretty pleased. We're gonna have to overseed and do it again next year, but it looks a lot better than it has. And alongside with that, with the Delta project going on, they've been coming in and taking some of the little cottonwood saplings that are growing in the park and kind of cultivating them, and they're giving us a few of those. That'll be the seedless or cottonless cottonwoods. And we've got 8 of them that they gave us, and we put in the campground already, and they're already starting to kind of take off. So
We get some shade in there.
get some shade,
Without
some
the-
grass.
Without the summertime snow.
Yes,
But yeah,
that'll be helpful.
that's where we're at on those. I've got to call into UDOT for the road base and grading, so hopefully we can get on that here shortly.
And that'll be for the South Jetty, the one that goes up to the end of it.
The one that will rattle your teeth out, right?
Oh, yeah. So that's awesome. That's a that's a huge win for, especially for the fishermen that, or anglers that come in. That has long been a pothole-filled road and a challenge, I'm sure, to figure out what to do with it. And so with enough road base, that'll be able to make that really accessible. The other grant that was offered was to Vineyard City, and Vineyard was able to purchase a sand rake that at least initially they'll be using down there at Vineyard Beach and Vineyard Beach South a little ways. And we're super excited to see how it works.
Yeah, so we received that last week. It's still bundled up because we haven't gotten our tractor yet. So I just texted the guy to see if we get an update on delivery of the tractor. Hopefully that tractor will be delivered within a week or so, and we get it all set up, and we'll have you come out. I know you expressed interest in coming out and seeing how that operates and stuff. So we're
Well,
going to
and
be
if nothing
excited to
less,
see.
people will be excited to know that there's a freshly raked sand beach that they can come and hang out on.
Yeah.
How often will you rake it?
I mean, this is all experimental. We're learning about this also, so it'll just depend on what we see the needs are. You know, and we'll be open for feedback from other people that have had experience, you know, to give us, you know, kind of their maintenance schedules and stuff also.
Awesome.
That's great.
Lake level, as Josh mentioned, we are not just Utah Lake. I checked the Central Utah Waters site this morning, and almost every reservoir, Strawberry Reservoir being the exception, but I'm told that 91% at Strawberry is the equivalent of full because they can't let it fill to overflow since there's no overflow. But Utah Lake's at 0.61 below full, so whatever that is, 7 inches below full. There's still a little bit of runoff coming off the mountains. Mike Rao could probably talk more about runoff, but I think that it's definitely on the slowing down side. We had a really dry spring, and that didn't allow for any major amounts of runoff to come off the mountains as we may have expected for a very average water year. But the lake is definitely full. Okay, so 4I, this is what I didn't hit on. We talked last time about putting in an application with the county for some major enhancement projects at Utah Lake. Those grants were successful. We received, what was the total number? 5.6 million in tourism tax grant dollars to develop 3 different projects on the lake. So one of the grants went to Saratoga Springs for this beach enhancement. It adds an extra jetty to the north of their existing marina, adds a beach area, and then some beach improvements, some pavilions, sidewalks, some additional paths. But a legitimate beach. So they carve down underneath and then put some material down and then add sand on top of that so that it doesn't get weeds and things like that as easily.
That's nice.
Those are just some 3D renderings of that. We're working with them. The grant was offered as a 1-to-1 match, and so the city's putting together their response so that they can capitalize on as many of those dollars as possible. The second one is in American Fork. Also sort of a phased approach to roll out their master planned improvements. So here's kind of the master plan of American Fork Boat Harbor, and then we'll focus on the portions that they're going to be able to do with this. So resurfacing of the parking lot, they're going to redo their entrance booth, and then here, right down here we get a whole new beach area. This is an existing beach that has lots of weeds and it is kind of a problem area for maintaining. But we get that, we get this little entryway with some bigger pavilions. One of those would be a rental area, and then some usable pavilions for picnics and so forth. It does some improvements along the lakefront, improves the ability for folks to park in the parking lot, because they'll restripe, they're gonna refinish and restripe it.
That's needed.
Yeah, very much so. It's long needed, that, they recognize that. So that'll help it so that it's not filled with puddles after a rainfall and so forth. But a very cool project. The third one is in Vineyard City. They have a major lakeside master plan, and they were able to receive a really good grant to fund their phase 1 portion of this. So this is all south of, these are the cooling ponds right here. So that's their second phase. So third phase is right down here. We're meeting with them, I think this week, to kind of talk more about what will actually be implemented right away. But they're, in the proposal, they have a pier that comes out down here on the south, so something like what you would see down in Huntington Beach. There's also a dock that's harder to see. Maybe I can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
There's a dock right here that has the potential for a restaurant to sit out on top of it, which has long been a dream of mine, to see something that lets people come down out onto the lake and be there. And so, I mean, they'll probably need to put screens on the balconies or something like that, but it's a pretty easy solution. But what we really have long wanted was, we don't need this all the way along the shoreline. We love the idea of lots and lots of natural restoration work and wetlands, but something to showcase what Utah Lake is and get people excited about it, so that they have a positive experience when they come down. So this
Well,
is
if you're out and boating around and you can stop and have dinner or get gas or whatever, only meant for people to stay on the lake.
It changes the tone of Utah Lake, in that it's a place that people come and they can stay there for a while. They can be out there, like you say, for the whole day, because they're not limited by what their cooler holds. So another one that we're really excited about. This one will butt up to Vineyard City's new city center, kind of an urban center that's got mixed retail, residential. So it'll be very much a hub for people to, not just to live, but also for people to come to. Right on the east side of this, there's a big promenade that comes down through the city center and terminates at this new beach center that we found this grant for. Right here is the new front runner station.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll have folks coming in from north and south.
And it's a double track too, so.
Yeah, and this will be completed by the end of the year. So we're very much moving towards this to be completed, and a lot of this development, Flagship Homes is I think they're going to be the ones doing, or Anderson Engineers, sorry. We'll be building a majority of this, and
there's some
ready to
very exciting
moving.
potential there. If some of the projects come in that they're working for, it'll be a game changer for Vineyard and Utah.
And
for the whole county.
I mean, it'll create a destination next to the lake for shopping, for dining, for living. Pretty neat change.
Other cities will look at that and think, why didn't we do it? So what was the grant total for those 3 projects?
5.6 million, 5.64 million if you want an extra number after the decimal place. And then lots of dollars that are coming as part of this through private and municipal. So 3 million, about just under 3 million will be a 1-to-1 match, so that doubles that portion. And then the Vineyard portion was just over 3 million, and with commitments from private and municipal of, I forget the exact number, at least 3 million for one of the parks down along the edge of the beach. And then if you include some of these promenades that are complimentary, it's,
It's 12.
yeah, another 12 million, so.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Okay. So we'll end with that part of that, so that's now number 4, III, the Utah Lake Shoreline Assessment Study. So this is the soils assessment. The soil samples have all been taken. They're all at the lab right now. And I'm interested to know how to best use those data. They'll turn that data set into an online story map. So we'll be able to kind of look through, and we ask them to focus on transition points. So where does it go from prime wetland to historic sandy areas? So that from a municipal standpoint, this could be a very helpful tool when you look long-term and decide where do you want to focus a potential beach development versus which areas should be maintained in their natural state of wetland that could bring in birds and wildlife.
So it looks like they got several samples along the vineyard area, is that correct?
Yeah.
I know that the developer would be interested in some of that information, you know, as we plan for the developments and stuff, kind of see what was found
Yeah.
there.
First and foremost is that we will be making this data set public so that it's available for anybody and everybody that wants to look at it. But we may also want to, especially as part of our general plan revision for Utah Lake, look at doing what Forestry Fire and State Lands pointed out last time in their presentation, and that's that they go through these points, these data points, and they list future potentials. So we've gone through the exercise, and if a jurisdiction or a municipality wants to say, oh, what could we do down in this area, they can pull up the map and say, oh, this might be a good area for that, or this might not be a good area for that.
Will be another data point to add for funding for whatever
Yeah.
we're looking for.
So they will have their final reports to us sometime. They'll complete the study in July, and then their final reports will be coming shortly after that. So as soon as we get the digital version of that, we'll share it with the committee, and we'll talk about next steps. But be thinking about that. How do we best use that data set? How far do we go with it besides simply having it available? Waukera Way, little by little we're moving ahead. As you know, this year's appropriations through the legislature were chopped right towards the end of the session, and then chopped yet again more recently. Today or tomorrow we'll have a report. We think that we ended up with $150,000. We were appropriated $190, and we asked for, after working with Department of Natural Resources, we asked for $150 to remain, but that would be a reduction because all budgets, all new money was asked to have at least a portion of that cut.
2, 5, and 10.
Yeah. And so we think that we're getting 150 of it. If we keep that 150, we're going to use it towards the drafting up all the legal documents for the Waukera Way project and potentially doing a little bit more fencing. Right now, we were able to, with grants that were already offered this year, and then the grant that will be arriving on July 1st, we have enough to fence the first pilot area, so that's about 50 acres. We've purchased all of the fencing material that goes on the north and south borders of it, so they're the shorter fences. They're field fence with a little bit of barbed wire on top and wooden posts. They're pinion or juniper posts. And then the west fence line. And then on July 1st, we'll order the taller fence because we're going to do an 8-foot fence along the eastern border to keep cows from ever having the potential to get into neighborhoods. That's what we want to really avoid. And so all those supplies are being stockpiled at the county public works office, and as soon as July starts, that'll give us the funding for that east fence, and we'll put some dedicated hunters and potentially a contractor for that taller fence to work and get that built, and we'll get it, start getting it grazed.
So will the 150,000 state money be available July 1st as well?
It should be, yes.
Okay.
We talked about the shoreline improvement grants. I jumped ahead on that one, sorry. Phragmites work this year. All the spraying was done in the fall. That was just over 4,000 acres that was sprayed. That's in the priority area, kind of the north end of the lake. And since then, the Marsh Masters have been out. The mowers work great, but not so much in deeper water. So we rethought that. We purchased roller crushers. It's a steel wheel that you can fill with water, and it has square blades kind of mixed all over across it, and it drives along and it chops the Phragmites up. Those work amazing in the deeper water, which this year is what we have all around the lake. So they've been able to treat over 1,000 acres from a smashing standpoint, and that represents quite a bulk of the north end of the lake now that it has flooded, or it's all inundated. You'll notice as you drive around the lake that the shoreline is so much tinier than it oftentimes is, and so those Marsh Masters have smashed down a large majority of this north end of the lake and are just getting ready to do treatments for next year. So one variation that we're moving towards is the Marsh Masters will likely start to do more of the spray treatments than we have done historically. As we make progress, we're trying to get into these areas where we've never been able to reach. Helicopters have to keep a buffer zone between them and structures and trees. And so we've outfitted, or we've purchased for the county machines. Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, I think that was their. The commission purchased the roller crushers, and Forestry, Fire, and State Lands purchased these. They're called boomless sprayers, and they'll be mounted on the sides of the Marsh Masters, and they can spray something like 30 feet out to each side. And those will allow them to get in and do far more detailed work. They can even work in and among the trees without harming the trees, but more successfully getting rid of. Dee will be excited to hear that finally, we'll be able to work through that frontage near the HOA at Saratoga and some of the other Saratoga Springs shoreline and take care of that Phragmites that's been so close to homes and trees that it's just never been touched.
That'll be great. It's got a nice growth.
I believe it. We've gotten lots of reports on it, and so that'll be taking place. The only other addition to the invasives work is that do we have anywhere else? Settlement finally took place down at Sandy Beach, and so another big project will be using that forestry tool that goes on the front of us, the county's skid steer, and it mows trees. We'll be working with the county and Forestry, Fire, and State Lands to get into that Sandy Beach area and mow out all of the unwanted vegetation as part of a major enhancement project that has been funded for 3 years now, but has not been able to move ahead because of the dispute with the property boundaries. Those have been finalized, and it should be converted into a very accessible beach. That will help some of your citizens that want an access point down on that end. Adopt a shoreline. Sam, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, you go to the next slide for me.
Yeah.
So we've recently had a renewed interest in the Adopt a Shoreline. The way the program has functioned until about 2 weeks ago has been all 27 access points have been up for adoption. And in the last 4 years, we went from 1 all the way until we now have actually just the state park, not officially yet, because I still need to talk to the Water Ski Club to have them named as it, because they're actually under the, what's it called, the Adopt a Park for the Division of State Parks. So they're taking care of the state park. We just haven't flagged it yet on ours. So, especially with the program getting adopted for the dedicated hunter program with DWR for giving hours for those who are wanting to do those tags, really helped the Adopt a Shoreline program grow very quickly. So what we wanted to run by you all today is, if you'll go to the next slide for me, Eric. This slide and the next, we have just some close-up shots of new areas that we're adding to the program. So we looked at areas near access points. So for instance, on the far left is the Saratoga Springs City Marina, but there are trails that go south and north of that marina, and we've added in 3 sections of trail that could be adopted. The picture on the top right corner is around Inlet Park near the mouth of the Jordan River, and we added in 2 additional areas because it's very heavily trafficked, a lot of garbage issues there, and so we wanted to have those, especially the hot springs, addressed. And then the bottom right corner is Shoreline Park in Saratoga Springs. That's right on the border of Lehigh and Saratoga. So the North Lake Park with the Loch Lomond Trailhead has long been adopted, but this area specifically hasn't been. And then the next slide, we have Lincoln Point. That was acquired by Utah County last year, 2 years ago now. And so we have had Lincoln Beach and what's called the Lincoln Point Access on the left side of that photo. Those have been adopted, but the entire point, which is an additional, I think, almost 17 acres, was added in as public land and hence accessible. And so we've added that in as well. And then on the right side is in Vineyard, just north of Linden Marina. The area around the Linden Drain has been consistently reported as a problem area for garbage. So we added that area.
Very popular for anglers.
Yes, and so a lot of it even ends up in the water. So we've actually got a guy who just adopted that, is going to be going out in his little 14-foot fishing boat and checking through all those shallows. The area around the Geneva ponds there, and then several sections of trail along Vineyard, as well as that small little polygon towards the bottom of the picture is actually the new Sunset Beach Park that was put in by the developer that I believe is just opening in the next week or two. Sullivan, is that right? They
have a punch list.
They've got a few things they got to get through. So we've added in all of these areas as adoptable areas because they're accessible from a public access point and also without, trespassing or something.
Are there any in the south?
So the only so far in the south is the ones on Lincoln Point.
Okay.
But on a quick review, these are the ones we've added so far. So we wanted to check with those in the meeting today if you happen to know of any other areas I didn't just mention in Saratoga, Vineyard, and then Lincoln Point. There might be areas we want to consider adding in as adoptable, if you will, to be cared for garbage.
We get calls on a regular basis from folks interested in an adoption, and
We don't have
to
enough.
some degree, we don't
Right
have areas to
Yeah.
provide.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because I get people always saying, well, is there a service? What can we do? And this would be great if it was in the.
And we have made a few other adjustments as well, because we have, I think in the last month, I've probably gotten 25 emails from different people saying, we want to do the Adopt Shoreline program. And so we added in these areas. We're also looking at having multiple groups adopt some of the existing access points. So like Sandy Beach or Inlet Park.
So it can keep up with.
Some of those that are very highly frequented, because in the agreement, they're only required to do 3 cleanups a year. Some people go down weekly, it depends, but if it's only the 3 per year, some of them need more attention. So we did that as well. And then we also just have some people who kind of do a one-off. They want to help with something like, we actually had, I went down to visit Lincoln Point to check it out for this and found 3 pieces of furniture abandoned on the property. And so when scenarios like that happen, we will just kind of put it out there. If somebody's saying, I don't want to do it long-term, we'll have them go out and get larger items or do a cleanup at an area we feel is really in need at that moment.
So did they contact you then for?
So I supervise this program specifically, as well as for the dedicated hunter portion and for the other volunteers.
So down around Sunset Beach there, we've had neighbors, residents go down, and they've done a lot of cleanup.
They have, yeah.
They've installed a rope swing, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know where the liability is there, but anyway, if they're interested in forming a group, I can have them contact you.
Yeah, so that would be great. Jake McCargan and I were talking about, there's also some concrete in that area that we're going to look at doing a cleanup to try and get the concrete chunks out of there too. Yeah. So we're excited. That's a beautiful park. We're excited to have people visiting the lake there.
Yeah.
And there's a permit that's already been permitted for that big cleanup.
Right.
Yep.
So that'll be sometime
So
soon.
in the next couple of weeks. Any other suggestions on areas on that?
Think about them, send them to us. We're happy to add areas to the program and keep the lake as clean as possible. Safety on the lake, and I apologize to push through, we're just kind of getting close, and I want to leave Mike Mills a bit of time to talk about the June 2nd program. One thing that we're working with our marinas on is looking into adding live camera feeds at each of the marinas, so that there's a feed that looks at the lake, one that looks at parking, and one that could monitor traffic in and out, so that we get a better idea of how many people are visiting Utah Lake on an annual basis. The state park is really the only entity that makes an effort at calculating the visitation on the lake. Our other marinas don't go that far even, and this would be a pretty accurate count of traffic in and out for visitation on the lake that we'd like to see.
Visitation and safety and.
Yeah,
Weather
and then,
conditions.
so it would
So
record.
how can we do a joint project on that too? I mean, because it seems to me that each of those municipalities that have a harbor would want to have increased safety. But then, so would Utah County Sheriff, as they're looking for rescuing.
So what we've proposed at this point is, there are entities out there that are great at managing apps for lake camera feeds. And so if we can pull together the dollars, and we've put in an application for a grant that could cover the cost of the installation and all of the hardware, then it would be a minor expense for power, essentially, to run these cameras. Again, compared to what most marinas are spending on an electric bill, it will be a very insignificant amount of increase. So for a small investment from those marinas, it provides a camera feed that all lake users can jump on, and they can click through the various marinas and go, yeah, the lake looks great. Which marina has plenty of parking? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
we like this one. And the parking's great right now, and then they can head in.
So we're looking for grant money for that.
Yeah, so we're looking for grant money. Well, did the one submission application go in yet?
We haven't submitted it yet. I'm working on drafting it right now.
But we've spoken with the grant offerer, and they said this looks like a prime type of project. Submit an application. So we're very optimistic. State Parks has already responded, and they're interested in having the camera feeds, and then we're working with the other marinas right now to be sure that everybody's on board.
Yeah, I think you should do it with county sheriff too,
Oh yeah, we'll get in touch with them.
because they might have some budget for some of
Okay.
that type. I'm just
Great
thinking
idea.
about what they
Yeah, so
might
it's,
have a little bit to add to the pot. Nobody has
Yeah.
enough to pay for the whole thing, but you get enough people adding.
so as more of the development goes on down at Vineyard, that's part of my request, is always to have some camera systems installed, you know. I don't have it at the beach yet, but I will be
This
getting
particular
that.
system, the one that we're interested in, but we'll have to go out for bid when we finally get the dollars in place, is a system that's sort of a collector system that uses radio frequency to send all of the video feeds to one hub, and that one hub, so we only need one hub that has internet. All the other hubs can simply just put one of these communication towers, so that places like Lincoln Beach, or potentially the front of Vineyard, that don't necessarily have an internet hub, can still have a live camera feed that's being pulled out of one location, and so it just bounces those signals across the lake.
So at Sunset Beach, I'll have internet there, then as we develop that others, I'll try, you know, the plan will be to have internet. If we have that available, then we just
Tie it into
feed
the
back
system.
to your
Tied
system.
in.
Yep.
And as people are around and going, we could look at each
And
site,
it-
not
and
just
it
for
records-
safety,
and
but
it
for
records.
how many people are there, and if
Yeah.
a restaurant comes there. I mean, it just adds all in.
So that, and
For the
there would be a DVR on
system.
that would record for a period of time. So if there's problems in a certain area, that not just anybody, but
Right.
the municipal owner would have access to review that video feed and say, oh, this is what happened yesterday at 3 o'clock.
It does eat up a lot of hard drive and stuff, so.
Well, it would, the one that we had as a proposal just stored, I can't remember, 7 days worth or something like that, and it just constantly is pushing
It
the
just
old
loops.
out and the new stuff in.
I've got 8 cameras at a park, and I want to say about a month, I think I've got two 4 terabyte hard drives or something like that. It eats it up pretty quick.
The other thing that we're partnering on.
Some images if you want for these.
Oh yeah.
You don't have to cover
So
all
the-
those.
so the commission-
did send this out.
We wanted to know, we'd reached out to marinas earlier, and there were some questions, is it needed, is it wanted? We did a survey, and people loved the idea. 90% said they would for sure want that. So, and we did the calculation, and from a statistical significance, 84 to 94%, or
86 to 94.
86 to 94% of people in the whole Utah County would likely have that same response. So we know that it's needed and wanted. Emergency VHF radio use. This is something that allows for boats to have emergency communications with each other. The lake is huge, and we feel like there is a potential for emergency situations where boaters could help communicate with each other to pinpoint where a problem is, and before Josh or before the county sheriffs would have a chance to get out to this area, there's a chance that a boater could, come to the rescue and save somebody that's on a tube that's floating out into the middle of the lake, and they just happen to hear on their radio that what's happening, where it's happening, and look over. And so this is a backup to the existing emergencies program that's in place. 911 is probably the very best use, since most of the lake has cell service. But this is a way for emergency communication between boats. Signage will get placed at all of the marinas that lets people know that when they're out on their boat, they sign into, do we do a picture of it?
Yeah, keep going.
They tune into channel 16, that's the emergency frequency, and then it also directs them to call 911, or provides the county sheriff's non-emergency phone number as well. So that'll have the county sheriff's badge on there. It'll be placed here at the state park, and then at all the other things.
So is it VHF or UHF?
Found out it's actually VHF.
Because I was wondering from our agenda, and it was different stuff.
Sorry, that was my bad.
I only thought to check this
Sam
morning.
asked me yesterday, VHF or UHF, what's that? I was like,
Ultra high
Oh,
frequency.
yeah,
Anyway, sorry
Yeah.
for the miscommunication.
that's all right, just making sure it was right.
So those signs will be posted at all our marinas. Windy Lookout is an application that was recently launched. Really cool system. It allows boaters to have the app going. It tracks all of the weather information in the vicinity, and when there's a spike in wind, it sends an alert to them so that they know that, if they can't handle 45-mile-an-hour wind, which is most boaters,
Right.
it's their clue to get off the lake as soon as they can. There's already been, close to 40 alerts issued to those that are using it, and 1,500 people or so have downloaded it, boaters that have downloaded
Does
that.
it show them where the nearest access point is to wherever they are on the lake so that they can get off in a quick way? Because I did have someone call me about that, and they were concerned about some wind coming up, but they just knew where they had gotten in, and they didn't know any other spot. And so they were like going,
great
where do I
feedback.
go? Do I just go to the edge and wait, or what? And I said, no, that would be just as dangerous if there's no place to land.
So we
might
just
be
met with
something to add in.
the app owner just yesterday, and he said, any ideas that you have, improvements? And I really like that one.
Yeah, closest landing point to where your location is.
Okay, we'll talk to him about that. And then we also spoke with, just in our morning meeting with our governing executive board, the director of natural resources was on that and liked the sound of it and wanted to talk more, because it's the sort of thing that might be applicable from a funding standpoint to have it at more than one lake that experiences wind issues. And my suggestion was Utah Lake and Bear Lake, from just the top of my head, both regularly have big wind events that cause problems for boaters. So
Yep.
maybe it's something that could go between the two. Lastly, every time we come down to the state park, we see this genius idea to have a loaner program for life jackets. Not everybody that comes to the lake is necessarily going out on a boat, and thus, have a, law enforcement's eye on them to make sure that they've got their life jackets present. Some folks are coming down for other reasons, and sometimes boaters probably go out and they just don't have the life jackets and they hope to sneak past without getting caught. One way or the other, we thought it might be good to do a drive for life jackets. If lots of families are like mine, and they've got growing kids, you have a box full of the old life jackets and a box full of the ones that everybody uses today. And maybe it would be the sort of thing that we could do a social media push and get a collection of a whole bunch of life jackets. I don't know how many you could use here, but we have 5 marinas, and only 2 of them that I'm aware of have a life jacket loaner program, you and Saratoga Springs. But if you could use more, and we could get a program set up, or even just a freebie at some of the other marinas, do you think that would be helpful?
Yeah, I know the family of the 2 girls that left off of the Knolls. They're
Right.
looking to put one up there. That's a take
yeah.
one, leave one.
At the Knolls area specifically?
Yeah, as kind of the memorial for the
Love it.
2 young ladies.
That's a good idea.
So I know that one may be in the works. I think it had just to pass through county commissioners and all that because it's on county property.
Yeah.
As far as us, every year I just fill out a form how many I need of certain sizes that walked off, and
Okay.
they send me ones
Oh,
on the program that we're on.
Does the Saratoga one run through your program, or is it their own?
No, I think that's their own.
That's their own, okay. I was curious.
So you would be set for now.
Yeah, we're good, but I like the idea. I always like the idea of
More life
more
jackets.
life
I do
jackets.
too. Well, I think people who have boats usually have them. It's the people who are going in the tubes and in the kayaks and in the paddle boards. They don't really
That's-
think about
That's
it.
the big ones, big groups that we're
Yeah.
seeing that don't have them. I'll go up to Tibble Fork a lot, and people are inflating their inflatable kayak or paddleboard. I have to ask them, you get life jackets to go with that? And, no, can't let you launch then.
Yeah.
Is there any liability of accepting used ones or anything like that?
With doing a drive like this?
Yeah.
I would.
Is there,
My
everything
initial
has
take would be
expiration dates nowadays, but.
Read the label, and if it's the right kind for you, then.
Yeah, that's
long
pretty
as
much
it's-
the
as long as it's in
thing
good
with
shape.
life jackets is there's not, the expiration date on it is, if the straps are all chewed up,
Yeah.
it doesn't work. If you can't read the label on the back that has the US Coast Guard labeling on it, it's not good anymore. If it's the really, really old orange ones that kind of have the air pockets in them, if you squeeze that and you hear air coming out, it's not good.
Yeah.
So if you did do
So
the
sort-
same thing,
sort through and
you
make
need
sure
to
we're not
sort through,
doing
make
junk
sure
ones.
that all the labels are good, all the straps are good, there's no tears in the fabric, all that type of stuff. But if
Incorporate
all
some
those
test
are good,
dummies
then
or
it should
something
be
to
good.
test
Well, and if we did
Throw
this
it in.
drive, if you put a list out that had all of those, these are ones that cannot be included, but if you have others that meet this standard, please bring them.
Yeah. Okay. We'll do a social media push and gather up as many as we can. I know that I can donate some.
I've got one, I think, actually, too.
I got a bag full of
lots
them. My wife will
people-
probably shoot
There you
me.
go.
Well, and the other thing you could do is talk to the marinas and some of the boat supply places and have bins that said, oh, you're here to buy a new one, drop off your old one.
Oh, I love it.
I don't know.
Okay,
I-
I know I can always roll them.
Even some sponsorships from some of those, maybe if, they wanted to have a sign up there, donated by or whatever,
You'll get 5% off or
Well,
10% off.
we'll see what kind of response we get.
Just those kinds of things.
If we get a crate full of them, we probably won't have to reach out too far, but.
Sullivan's got a bag already.
Yeah.
That'll jumpstart it.
So we'll see how that goes, and we'll reach out to our marina access points. Any idea how we might connect with, maybe go through the sheriffs, would they be the ones working with the family that?
They reached out to me and Ty. We were trying to determine if it was on state lands, so if they would go through Forest Fire state land or on county, but it looked like it was county. So I think they're still kind of working with Ty a little bit, and I think
Is it Richard that they're dealing with over at the county?
no, I think they're going through the sheriff's office. I think they're going through Justin Gordon,
Okay.
but I'm not.
I only know like one sheriff, Walla Pershaw.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Justin's just under him.
Okay.
He's one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Justin's under Wally.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll connect with them as well and find out if they could use, depending on how many we get, we'll see if we could put supply some there, because that would be ideal, is people can walk away with as many as they want. If people are stealing life jackets, it means they want to use them for something.
And the main thing on that one was, leave one to save a life, take one to
Save
They
yours or
had some little
something.
slogan that they were gonna put on it, which
Great.
was really cool.
That's awesome.
Okay, I'll stop there. Maybe,
All
can
right.
we do 6 first real quick?
Yeah,
For Mike.
yeah, Mike, well, we need to. We'll skip ahead and do June sucker update. And all the other things. Northern Pride, which we need to get out and
So, Eric, it looks like Mike's not on here anymore.
Oh, then I guess you can do yours after all.
Yeah, he's not on here.
Okay.
All right, then we will not have Mike's update, and we will go with Sam and communications.
Okay, just pulling up the 2 slides that I had that I'll cover very briefly for you all. Oh, sorry, Eric, I did at the same time as you. Okay, the first is just the podcast to keep you all updated on the most recent outreach effort. As of, I think, yesterday when I put this together, we're at over 2,100 plays across 18 episodes, and those episodes have been released weekly since, I think it was the first week of February. The top 5 episodes based off of those plays that we've had are about the future of the lake, which isn't really a surprise there. We're excited that people are wanting to learn about the future. Fishing at Utah Lake, we did that recently with Mike Packer from Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. We actually just had him back on Monday this week to talk about catfish specifically, so that's going to be our episode going up this week. The Utah Lake Monster, people like learning about that story here at the lake. The Utah Lake Miracle is actually a story about Ty Hunter and Jason Allen rescuing twin brothers out on Utah Lake. This is maybe almost 10 years ago now, or maybe just over 10 years ago. And then about the Wakaraway Conservation Project. So about the podcast, the last thing I'd say is this chart just shows that since we started the episodes, we're on an upward trend. We have some peaks when certain episodes get launched or they're of more interest. And so we're monitoring that, but we're excited to see that it definitely is growing, and so the audience is expanding, who's listening to that and learning more about the facts, fiction, and fun at Utah Lake. And then lastly, just wanted to share that one effort we're making, we had a volunteer helping us to develop an actual framework for our outreach efforts. We've kind of had, the idea in our minds of what we think is good outreach and what we want to pursue, but we really wanted to try and provide a better structure, not only for organizing our efforts, but also organizing the reporting and the success of those efforts. So right now we're working on developing the mission and key objectives that are going to probably center around sharing of information to enable people to have a good experience at the lake and improve the general public perception of the lake. The pillars of the program are communication and education. That's all of our digital resources like the podcast, social media website and such, as well as our various education efforts like doing booths at various city festivals and such to talk about the lake and the projects. Community events would be our field trips and the festival and the other events we help with. And then volunteerism, the Adopt a Shoreline program and other ways that people can volunteer with us. And then we're working to develop an impact assessment utilizing things like the analytics that are available through our website, social media, etc. And then statistics gathered from things like attendance at Utah Lake Festival and things like that. And then we'll also be working to try and use those processes to determine what our future initiatives should be and what needs the program has in order to continue to be successful. So That is something that's still not finalized, but we hope to implement here in July, in the start of this fiscal year, in order to better assess the impact of the outreach efforts that we're making and refine them and improve them in order to accomplish our objectives. That's what I've got for communications.
Do we think any of our fall programs are going to be implemented with COVID?
Our plan right now is to, as long as it is permitted, have the field trips in person. If not, we do have the videos that we already made for the spring that we could fall back on. And we would probably try and add in additional efforts to make it as best an experience as possible. Right now,
if school is on, it probably will be an acceptable type of activity. It's safer than being in a classroom. But if school is not on, it's unlikely that we would move ahead with it.
We're going to be deciding here in July, so they have four contingency plans in place.
Well, we'll bring it up with you guys and find out if they're using one of those contingencies and we don't know how to respond, we'll bring it to
Okay.
you.
Perfect. All right, roundtable updates from committee members?
Lots of people using the lake out of the HOA marina?
Quite a few, not a lot, not any more than usual,
Normalish?
normally.
I think down here, from my observation, it has skyrocketed. I mean,
People want to get outside. They're so tired of being inside, they just want to be out.
Yeah.
I've come down and it is happening down here. I mean, there's
My campground's been full the last 3 nights.
really
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
middle of the week.
That's cool.
It's because of the golf.
Sorry, the park's campground.
Yes.
Good clarification.
I've got to fix that.
I think the holiday that we had recently, there were a lot more boaters, but they
Yeah.
could be coming from anywhere,
Yeah.
from the north end or even further south. Up to 8 or 10 or 15 boats, that's it, in the
Nice.
afternoon.
You know that Linden Marine and AF Marina reported record months, I think, for April and May. I don't think I checked with anybody.
That's the nice part about down here is, you know, a lot of the other state parks and stuff have to go to capacity closures. I can fill these parking lots, and the lake's so large, there is no social distancing issue.
Rules or
Issues.
anything,
Yeah,
So I haven't had to go to capacity closures,
Yeah.
and it's
Well,
definitely.
that's set that as a goal.
But you know,
Right.
the governor helped us out quite a bit by saying stay safe, stay home, and invade state parks, so.
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, there's been more activity down at Vineyard Beach and stuff, so, I mean, if we had more parking and stuff, I think it'd be even more busy, but it's
Yeah.
coming, so.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think that if there was more parking available at all of the access points, we would see more people utilizing.
The beauty of it is that we have long professed that all it takes is for people to come down and see the lake and hang out at the lake once, and they're hooked to come back again. And so the silver lining to the craziness that we find ourselves in right now, pandemic and such, is that people are getting out and trying out the lake. It's nearby, they get out, they enjoy it.
And I guess that's kind of where, and I don't have enough intelligence to explain all the details about the HAB warnings and stuff like that, but the criteria and the numbers they're using don't coincide with what really other people think are there safer issues. And so, you know, we want to promote the lake and we're getting blasted by these warnings that are not really accurate.
So I forgot to bring that up, and I don't know if we did it at the last meeting, but this year, for the first time, all of the thresholds that are used for advisories were adjusted to almost double what they were last time. So what was previously the brink of a threshold of an advisory is now up here before it is at the brink of an advisory. And so we know that there have been years where it's been way above that new threshold, but there's also been months where we have been just barely above that historic threshold, and that'll now be quite a bit below where it hits that advisory. So I'm kind of upset that we're not doing an equal amount of monitoring this year, because I was fascinated to see if that adjustment in those thresholds was gonna really reduce the amount of time that we stated in advisory, but one way or the other, it was reset at a more, what seemed to be more reasonable level, and it'll be interesting to see how that impacts.
I think advisory, people worry, people ask me, they worry about the advisory, they worry about the wind and their safety. In that respect, they worry about if they run out of gas, and they worry about if there's a place to get food. So if we can start, you know, addressing those and really showcasing not just where you put your boat in, but all of those other things, I think it adds to the recreational opportunities. Our fishermen already kind of know those things, but recreation people.
Yeah, the regulars, they would like for those advisories to be more often, to keep people off the lake.
Yeah. But it's a big enough lake, as was pointed out by Josh, that there's plenty of social distancing, and if you just know where to go once you're out there.
Yep. Awesome.
All right. I don't know if we have any members of the general public that would like to make a comment. Yes.
No, I was just wondering, we've had a couple of drownings in North Angle Lake, raising those two young women. They were on flotation, but I wonder if they had personal flotation wearing.
No, they
I
didn't.
think warnings for marinas for that, if they're not there, would be advisable. And we can do that as an association. We can just, each every member of our association with that information, but wear personal flotation, not just what you're on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any outreach to encourage anyone getting in the lake to wear a flotation device would be.
Go ahead. I think what a lot of people don't realize as well is it is state law. If you're going 50 feet from shore, even if it's like on an inflatable mattress, you've got to have a life jacket on it. And I talked to a bunch of people on the beach just this last week. I talked to over 200 people, and some of them had those little pool floaties, and they didn't know that.
Just not that I'm hoping that some people don't have to, but what's the rule for adults? They have to have it with them or something?
Have to have it with them. We still highly encourage, if they're over the age, it's 12 and under have to be wearing them, so 13 and over, they have to have one available for them. We still highly encourage that they wear it.
Yeah.
To that point, Dee, for your HOA and for others, the Division of State Parks has put together a lot of great videos that talk about that, that show examples of how important it is that, you don't know if you're going to fall off your paddleboard and can't get that life jacket. That's why they recommend you wear it. So they have some videos on YouTube or on their other social media that your HOA could share that video to your residents.
Okay.
That's already out there to try and encourage people to use life jackets more.
You could have, at these new life jacket loaner programs, you could on the signage have a QR too, where they could just go like this and watch the video real quick.
Yeah, that would be good to go.
Is there any current signage available that we could put up like at Vineyard Park or anything like that? Is there any signs available? Or?
Like these little kiosks that we have out here, I would assume we have.
We'll talk with Ty.
Yeah.
He would have, if anybody had signs available to be posted, he'd have them, right?
Yeah, and another key thing that we're noticing this year that, I don't know how many other marina managers are in here, I don't think many right now, but we're seeing an uptick in carbon monoxide issues this year.
Oh,
We already had
back of the boat.
We already had carbon monoxide poisoning that led to a hyperbaric chamber from here on a young child, but everything ended up okay. But just the other day, we had a boat pulling somebody in the water right behind the boat, right in that carbon monoxide zone. So that's going to be one of the big pushes for state parks this year is pushing out carbon monoxide awareness again. We haven't had to do that in years, but we're kind of cycling back into that.
So kids were being towed behind the boat, not far enough back?
No, these ones, the one that actually led to the poisoning, they were sitting on the swim deck with the boat motor running. And it just
that's
piled up, and
important.
one of the kids just kind of killed over. But the one from the other day, she just jumped out of the boat and grabbed the tow rope. And when I first saw her, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was more worried about prop cuts because of how close behind the boat she was. But aside from that, she was sucking in all the fumes. So
What's a safe range? Is there some material on that?
You gotta be at least 20 feet back.
And are there boats that are, I mean, what about surf boats? Those are commonly really close to the behind the boat, is that?
Yeah.
Are they designed different or something, or is it still advised against?
Well, it's 20 feet back if you're not in a standing position.
Oh, okay.
So if you're in that standing position, then
You're getting
Okay.
fresh
you're
air.
all right.
Interesting.
But yeah, I've seen a lot of people, a lot of boats now, they're building them so there's like seats in that swim deck area.
Yeah.
So people think they can sit there. Well, you can't if the boat's not running. But if it's running or you're.
I think that's an
you're
important thing
realizing
for us to push out on our social
Yeah,
media,
so
something
you
like
said
that.
Division's gonna be doing some
Yeah,
division
we've already-
communication.
They already pushed some verbiage across on the state parks.
The Facebook page. Okay, I'll check for it. It's something we can definitely.
But I think we're gonna be doing some videos and stuff on it as
And
well.
then you also
Okay.
mentioned the 50 feet out for swimming for kids. You know, I'm thinking every grocery store right now has the 6 foot. I mean, our sidewalk out there has 6 feet, so people probably misjudge how far 50 feet is. It's not that far.
No, it's.
They think 50 feet is way far out there, but it's not too much. So.
Yeah, I made a lot of people mad initially, but if it saves one life, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, so that might be another one to just
And
put
just,
out there.
and just being in a wavy lake, I don't think people realize how challenging it can be to swim when waves get very high. I mean, all it takes is one splash in the face, and what was a strong swimmer is all of a sudden a panicked swimmer, and it quickly goes into a bad
Yeah,
place.
people underestimate, you know, like,
Well, and on this side especially, you know, it's so shallow, you have to go way out there to get deep water.
Yeah.
And so I think that leads people to be not as aware.
Yep. We'll push on it.
All
Okay.
right, our next meeting is October 21st here at the State Park. If there's nothing else, then the motion to adjourn.
So moved.